Hello and welcome. This is Cherie with Rehash Fiber, and today we're going to talk about knitting the gauge swatch. Does anybody love doing it? No. So we're going to get that off the table right away. Now, it is very necessary to do because we love knitting, we love wearing our finished garments, and the gauge is the best way to have control and know what we're doing and end up with the correct size fitted garment when we're done. So we got to do it. It's one of those things. Now, if you're brand new to knitting, when you look at a pattern, the gauge is going to be listed in one of the first items. To do the gauge, you want to knit the stitches it calls for and the number of rows. But there's a few ways you can do that. You can do exactly as it says, or you can add 2 rows of garter to each side, or you can knit it bigger. You just need to be able to measure 4 inches and make sure that your stitch and row count falls into that same amount that the pattern calls for. Another key thing to do is to block it. To block an item, you need to wet it or steam it. I usually put the swatch in a sink of water, then lay it out on the mat and pin it down. You do not want to stretch it when you're pinning it down. Or you can pin it down, squirt it with a squirt bottle, or steam it. You need to know how the yarn is going to react after it's been wet. And I'm going to tell you a little side story. Actually, I've been knitting for years and I wasn't doing a full gauge swatch. I would do enough just to know that I had the right needle size going. And I thought, if I need more rows, I'll just add more rows when I'm going. And it worked out until it didn't. I made a beautiful shirt, wore it a couple times, washed it, and it seemed to grow by 2 inches in all directions. I'm like, no! If I would have just done the gauge. So that was my defining moment that from here till the end of time, for fitted, worn garments, I will do the gauge. The size of your stitches will depend on a few different things. It will be the yarn that you're using, the size of the needle, the way you knit, and the tension in your knitting. And you need to know what you're doing so that you can make adjustments and do it correct for the pattern. It is worth it to do this so that you spend all that time and money making your garment. You will be happy in the end, and you will know all along the way what you're getting. So another tip of mine is, as you're going along in the knitting, every few inches, you may want to check your tension to make sure that you're staying on track. Because if you have a very tense day or you're getting a little loose, your tension will change and your size will change. So you just want to stay on track with that. Go ahead and knit what it says and then adjust it to 4 inches. So if it gives you 1 inch, multiply it, you've got your 4 inches. That is a good number to work with. Also, if it doesn't give what stitch you should use, default to stockinette stitch. If you are doing a pattern that has a knitted pattern running through it, they should give you the gauge in the pattern and you want to do that. Now, if you're doing lace, you want to make a bigger swatch than 4 inches. I would say go 6 to 8 inches. Just because there's so much going on, you want to be able to count correctly and have enough to count. Also, if you're doing a gauge with a yarn where it's very hard to see stitch definition, say boucle or mohair, do the exact number of stitches that the gauge calls for, and then you know from there how that's working. So just know you can adjust your needle size up to 3 different sizes. So if you're knitting and your swatch is smaller, just increase your needle size till you get the swatch the correct size, and also in the other direction if you need to size down. So when it comes to measuring, you just need a ruler or a little gauge checker that you can get from the craft store, where it does have a ruler on one side. It has your 2 inches for your stitches and your rows. Also, you can check needle sizes. I keep this in my bag all the time. You want to measure it while it's laying flat. So if you have felt the way I felt about you hate having to use up your precious yarn for a gauge swatch, all is not wasted. Do it, and you will have a nice collection of swatches. You can always stitch them together to make a blanket or a pillow or something of that sort and use them. That's what I do with the pretty colored ones that are out of Superwash Merino. However, with the specialty fibers, I keep the swatch in a box that I call the touch box. And if somebody is curious, what does something feel like, I can share it with them. And I tag it with these little tags. So we have here dog, cats, homegrown cotton, pineapple, baby yak. Also, I enjoy feeling them. It's fun to have that little collection. Another thing I do is I knit swatches of patterns that I'm curious about. And then I have a collection and I can actually look at them and touch them before I actually make something with it. So those are just some things you can do with it. Yarn is not wasted. That is going to be it for today. So I just want to remind you, make that gauge swatch. You'll be happier in the end and you'll know what's going on the whole time. Happy knitting and thanks for watching.